Okay, so now we've got the area. We've still got the radius set to private. What if we wanted to know the radius of the circle over here? Remember, if I tried to get the radius right now, it's going to tell me it can't because it's private. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to change the access. Instead, I'm going to make a new method. Okay, so here's what this method's going to look like. I'm going to make this method public. It's also going to return a double. I'm going to call it getRadius. Now, once again, the user doesn't need to give me any information for this. In fact, I don't need to do any math. I'm just going to go ahead and return the radius. Now, what's going to happen is, even though it's a private variable value, I'm giving an indirect path to the user to see the radius value from a client class. They won't be able to change it, but they'll be able to see it. Okay? I've given them a different way to get access to it. So if I go back to my tester class now, okay, I still can't do this. I still can't just try to call the variable. That's still not going to work. But what I could do in place of that now is I could say system out print, and I could say c1.getRadius. That's a public method that I just created to get the radius value. Now, for C1, it would just say 0.0. If I made it C2, it would say 1.68. Okay? It would tell me the current radius value of circle 2. So let's see. Now, remember that circle's radius is private. I don't have direct access to it, but I found a way to get it. I had to create a method that was public to share the radius with me. Okay, what I still can't do, I can't take c2.getRadius and treat it as a variable. So I can't like try to assign 2.34 to it. It's gonna be confused, okay? You can't try to like write onto a method. You can write onto a variable that's public, but not onto a variable, not onto a method. That doesn't make any sense. If I wanted to keep the variable setting at private, yet allow someone to change its value from a client class, well, what I'd have to do is I'd have to make another method. Okay? So these methods that we've seen here so far are called accessor methods. They didn't change the state of my circle. Okay? So these did not change the state of the circle. The state is what its current values are. So this was an accessor method. This was also an accessor method right here. Okay? Now, the next method I make is going to be called a modifier method. So in this method, I'm actually going to void the return type. Now, what that means is I'm not going to give an answer to this question. It's not really going to be a question. It's going to be more of a purpose. The user of this method can change the radius value even though it's set to private. And here's how. Okay, to use this method, you're going to have to tell me what you want the radius to be. I'm not going to just guess. So you're going to have to put a double value in to right here. Maybe I'll call it rad again. Okay? The other rad that I created is local, only to this method. It couldn't be used anywhere else, so there won't be any confusion. Okay? Or I could call this one R, or whatever. Okay? I'm now going to assign that value to my radius value. And remember, like I said earlier, Java keeps everything flowing from right to left. So that value that comes in as a parameter is going to be assigned over to the instance variable. All right? Now, when I say void, I'm saying that I'm not going to give a return. And I'm going to be able to compile, right? Remember earlier with our double? Before I put that return in and I hit compile, it wouldn't let me. By putting the word void there, I've created a way for me to write a method that does not actually produce a return. Okay? And again, this is called a modifier method. So this actually does change the state of this object, as opposed to an accessor method that doesn't. Okay, so now I could go back to the client class and I could actually start changing the radius value. So for example, if I wanted to, I could change C1. What I would do is I would say C1.setRadius, and I'll put in whatever I want here. So it just has to be any type of double. So I could say 10.234, and now that's my new radius for C1. And so now, if I wanted to see that radius, I would say system.out.print C1.getRadius, and that would print the new radius value. Okay, you might notice I didn't put that method inside of a print statement. If I did, I'd get a compile error. You can't print a void, okay? So that method doesn't return an amount or an answer or a string or a Boolean, so you can't print it. You can't print a void. It would just result in a compile error. So I just went ahead and called that method all on its own. And I didn't like try to say it equals something else. I just called the method, put a number in there, and that was that. Okay, so if I ran this now, we'd see 10.234 print eventually. Right here, that's the new radius value of that circle after I changed it. Okay? All right, you can also make a method private. So like my getRadius method, if I wanted to, I could make it private. I'm not sure why I would. Now, I can make that method private and I can still compile, and I can actually use this method from within this class, and that would compile just fine. And that's kind of weird because if you notice, when I called that method, I didn't put anything in front of it, right? I didn't say like C1 dot or C2 dot. That's because I'm not in the client class right now. I'm in the circle class. The method belongs to this class, so if you call it in here, it can only be applied to this circle, the one that we're actually working with at this moment. So I don't need to put anything in front of that method call because there's no other option. You can't have like other circles in here to worry about right now. Well, we could, but we'll look at that another day. Right now I don't, so I can just go ahead and call this method freely, and it's going to be fine. Now, what I can't do, since I made this method private, what I can no longer do is I can't come over here and compile my tester class now. It's going to say, oh no, you can't do that anymore because you made it a private method. So you're out of luck. Okay? So why would you ever make a method private? Well, like I think I mentioned earlier, right? Like sometimes you might have like a really big method that you're using over and over and over, and you just want to put it in there. It's called a helper method sometimes. And you just store some code in there that you're going to keep using over and over.